Let's go. Yes.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Are you guys seeing all my slides or my presentation type deal? There we go. Is that better? Hopefully
Perfect.
you can see slides.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, welcome. And we're so happy that you are joining us over your lunch. Hopefully you have something great to eat. If you don't, maybe you can get something afterwards. That's fine. My name is Molly Aschoff, and I'm the Assistant Administrator at ESUCC 8 in Neely. I've been the Distance Learning Coordinator, Digital Learning Coordinator, Media Specialist, PD team member, all those kind of things. So hopefully you'll be able to take some things away today that we talk about. We're actually going to talk about one of my favorite, or what I think is a very, very important topic that was covered in the distance learning playbook. And I believe it was section 3, but it is, oops, now I lost my cursor. There we go, student and teacher relationships, module 3. I think this is just huge. I think that in a classroom, it's huge and it's tough. It's really hard to do. And then when we talk about going remote, it's even harder. And so I think that teachers spend a lot of time, or have to spend a lot of time, developing these great relationships anytime. But it's something we really need to think about if we're doing a hybrid or remote type learning environment. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I just love this. I think no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. And this can be in school or in any part of your life. I'm guessing you can probably even think of your own situations and where you've been comfortable and you've went out on a limb and you've tried something new. It's always been probably times when you felt very secure in your relationship of whoever you were with. All right, so the learning intentions that were laid out in the distance learning playbook, they have 3 of them here. And so you can kind of just look through those really quick. I'm going to give you not a whole lot of time, maybe about 10 seconds at the most to read through those. Now I want you to think of which of those 3 are you going to focus on as you are listening today. And I know you're going to listen and take things probably that will hit all of them, but what are those 3 as you're thinking that you really want to focus on and pay attention to when Lisa and I talk about different things that would help you be able to accomplish that learning. All right, another thing that the book lays out that I really like, and I don't think we talk enough about it in our own practice, is success criteria. What will it look like if I'm successful at accomplishing my learning intention? And so the book laid these out, and I just think that they're really great. But you guys can all read, so I'm gonna let you read through those. And same thing, kind of think about which ones you might, as I read through them, I picked up 3 of them that I thought were kind of really what I wanted to, or maybe possibly needed to work on. I think that in the positions that we are, sometimes people come to us for, we're very good fixers, is what I should say. I don't know if they come for us for advice, but we're good at fixing things. So I thought, you know, in my relationships, creating that environment which errors are valued. So in my case, I would really need to ask people, you know, how they think they did, how they think they could fix the situation, or things they could do before I just jump in and fix it. So that was something that I thought about. I know when we get into our breakouts, we're going to focus on the chilly classroom. That's going to be what Lisa focuses on. And I'm going to focus on these designing situations where you have good touch points with students so you can make those relationships. All right, so another thing is our mind frame of visible learning. When we are thinking about teacher and student relationships, what is that going to look like? What are the kind of things that I need to be doing to increase those? Or what do great teachers do to have these great relationships? And there's a great list here from Hattie. One thing that I see a lot in my smaller schools is that bottom one. When my teachers, they're singletons, when they have the opportunity to collaborate with other teachers, it just makes them better teachers. And so when they hear about how other teachers are doing things, and in this case, engaging their students, building those relationships, that just helps them in their practice too. So any way we can allow our teachers to collaborate, I think is huge. All right, I'm gonna just escape for a second. I wanna find my chat because people were putting in, oh, there it is, sorry. They were putting in what they thought were good indicators of good student-teacher relationships. And before we get any farther, I just wanna look at some of those. We had personal interests are known, there's dialogue, not just monologue. Their students are safe. They're willing to share about themselves, smiles on the teachers and students' faces. Those are awesome. All right. So I should have checked in with those before. So when we're thinking about digital or remote learning, there's 5 questions here that they have that how you can improve those relationships with your students. And I think this slide is great. I would take these questions and when I'm sitting down with a teacher that's maybe struggling with remote learning or just wanting to check and see how they're doing with remote learning. And we know that you can't learn if you don't have a relationship, a positive relationship. And we'll look at some of that in a little bit. But I think these questions are great lead-in for discussions with the teacher. And so the book has even more examples if you're reading along with the book, but how do you seek connections, or how do your students seek connections to you? So sometimes it's not just how do you make that connection, but how can they connect to you? So it's that reciprocal. How do they know that you care about them? And we can do that in a lot of different ways. Check in with them, be present. A lot of, I thought when we went remote, kids felt that they lost the personal touch. They were still meeting over Zoom maybe with their class, but it was whole class. It was really hard to get to feel like the teacher was listening to just them, that you kind of get that one-on-one once in a while in the classroom. And so being able to find time to make a one-on-one connection with your students, whether it's office hours or maybe just scheduling that time with those kids one-on-one, even if it's just to talk and visit, how important that is. They want to know that you care about them, that they want to know that you hold their abilities in high regard. And I think sometimes until we've managed how to like technically run a Zoom or those kind of things, that was lost because whoever learned how to use their mute and unmute button was the one that you heard all the time and those kind of things, or until a teacher figured out how to do all that. Some kids didn't get a chance to communicate and talk. And so I think that that's really important that we let them know that we're aware of their abilities and want to hear from each student. And that's really hard to do in a Zoom. It's even hard to introduce people in a Zoom, but hopefully you'll come away with some good ideas. And then just how to foster that deep learning, that enjoyment of learning. I just come from meeting with my teammate Menti, who we hadn't seen since March. And I asked him, how he thought remote learning went. And he said, oh, it was great. We didn't hardly have to do anything. I said, oh, so you'd like to go back to remote learning? He's like, no, because this time we will have to do things. And I thought, well, you know, that's really good, because they're already setting that stage that learning is going to continue if they go to remote learning. And so it does look differently. You know, I was a distance learning coordinator, so we've been telling people that you can't just take what you did before. You can take the idea, you can take the concepts, but you got to make it apply in that remote situation. And it does take a little bit more work sometimes, maybe, or change the way we think, but it's totally worth it to get those kids into a deeper level stage of learning and thinking. All right, so student-teacher relationships. We've seen this before. The gals last week had a great representation, and if you were part of PDO and looking at Hattie's work, but student-teacher relationships have a 0.48 positive effect on learning. And so that's pretty high. And it's kind of one of those no-brainers, but we can overlook it really easy because we get so busy with preparing for the test, or, you know, meeting this standard and checking this off and doing those kind of things, that sometimes I remember being in the classroom and at the end of the day thinking, did I even talk to all my students? Because we were so busy trying to get this and that done. So that student-teacher relationship is huge in the effect size. On the flip of that, peer relationships are influenced by student-teacher interactions. So if you have a student that feels disliked, that has a 0.19 negative, or a negative 0.19 effect. So it's like reverse effects. And so our relationships so influence those peer to student relationships that we can have just as detrimental effect on student learning with our relationships as we could on the plus side if we don't have positive relationships. And so sometimes that's difficult. We've all had those students, but this just goes to show how important it is that our relationships are positive and we model that. And I know through the initial shutdown and going remote, that was really hard for teachers to do. Teachers were really struggling, not necessarily singling kids out as not having a positive relationship, but just being positive in their overall attitude in a remote learning situation, because they were frustrated. They, you know, weren't ready for it. They weren't prepared, all those kind of things. So all that makes a huge difference on student learning. And that's what we're here for. I think this is huge. If you think you can hide it, you're probably not. So it's really important to have a positive, or if you can't, be that positive person to find that positive relationship for that student. This is huge because I don't know, I was a special ed teacher also, and sometimes it was, you spent more time trying to provide those relationships for those kids. And it's not an either or, it's a combination. You have to have great relationships in order to have great instruction happening. So you can be a really, really great teacher, and if you don't make personal connections with your students, you're not going to have a really, really great learning environment. And I love the pumpkins. I love this time of year, so just had to put those in there. So before we go on, I want you to think, what do you suggest teachers do to build online relationships with their students? You can just throw that in the chat, or go off mute and just share. So what are things you're telling your teachers now about building relationships, and how to do that remotely, or do it now before we get remote? Yes.
Molly, it's Marcy. I'll just come off mute a second.
Perfect.
So my very first day of student teaching, you know, as a baby teacher, at the end of the day, my cooperating teacher said, hey, let's go make some deposits. And I was thinking, yes. However, I had no idea what she was talking about. So as we were walking down the hallway from that 4th grade classroom to the gym, she's like, we need to go make some deposits in these banks because we're gonna have to make withdrawals later on. And she's like, so what I want you to do is I want you to walk into that gym and talk to all those 4th grade kids who are waiting for the bus. And I want you to talk to them about anything other than academics, school, whatever it is. I want you to find out if they have puppies. I want you to find out if the blue tennis shoes are their favorite color, whatever it might be, and make deposits. So that's one of the things that I try to impart to teachers as well.
I agree, Marcy. That's wonderful. And you've heard the adage of you should make 3 deposits before you make a withdrawal. You know, I mean, there's all of that out there, and so it's true. And sometimes, I mean, I hate to say it, kids get just as busy or in just as busy a world as us that they don't maybe have anyone to tell about their shoes and how much they love them. And so you just taking that time to do that is wonderful. Anyone else want to come off? We have doing interest surveys or putting their interests, Chris said, on a Padlet. I love that. Getting to know students' names. That's huge. I think both Lisa and I will refer to that and talk about that. Introducing themselves, Flipgrid. That's a great idea. Anybody want to come out and talk about anything else? All right, I've got about 2 minutes before we're supposed to switch, and that's perfect because I have about 2 more slides. I got to find them here. On technical difficulty, I can't find my, there we go, present. All right, so thinking about what you tell teachers, like the story Marcy gave, and helping them build those relationships, I would say that anything you do in the classroom, you can do that online somehow in building those relationships. You just need to think about it and maybe get a little creative. And I know that Lisa's going to share some of those creative ways to do that, and I have a few too that we'll talk about in our breakout sessions. So one of the things that I know Marzano talks about and other people talk about, the 2x10, and I just want to throw this in there because this is something like if I was working with teachers about talking about building relationships in remote learning environments, I might say, well, you've heard about the 2x10, or maybe your school does it, and you find these students and you talk about, like Marcy was, other things, talk about anything but school. How are you going to do that online? And so, you know, have them think about, well, what if what if my student that I'm trying to make connections with aren't showing up? How am I going to do that? Just kind of challenge them to take those relationship building strategies that they're currently using and figure out how to make them work online. In this case, maybe a one-on-one, a Zoom, an email, maybe it's a phone call. Maybe you have to get out the phone and actually call someone. Crazy notion to do that, but I just think that we really need to step up our game in building relationships, because I think they did suffer partly because we were just trying to survive. Just like my teammate Menti said, it's going to be different this time, and it should be different this time. All right, there's an article that I was reading that I put down in the notes section that you can get this article, but this has started out, and you hear these stories all the time. And so I just kind of wanted to show that you guys, or you teachers, have the power to do this. Sean was in 6th grade, and a teacher saw him. He felt for the first time, someone actually noticed him and challenged him and learned that he had a love of words. And he's also the author of this blog, but so those words came into play in his life later on too. And so just know that you have the power, whether it's as a professional developer or with the people you work with, or as a teacher, we have the power to unfortunately make and break kids. And so let's be in the making business there. All right, it's a process. And you're going to see that. We're learning how to build these relationships online. It's easier when they've been there the first part of the year. Thankfully, we got to do that. But it is a process, and it's something that no matter what, if you are in class face-to-face or just right now in your professional life, you have to always work on your relationships. Just because you have a relationship doesn't mean that it's sustainable. And so it's just like that with your students. You have to constantly work on that. It is a process. All right. Any questions or anything before we move on? Anyone have anything else that they want to share?
So if you can leave that slide up, actually, it might help us in facilitating the move to the breakout room, actually, for this next portion of things. And Molly, thanks so much, too. I want to say that I do think it's really important to think about that we have to establish those and maintain those. And that last slide, really just kind of points out that both of those pieces are part of that conversation. And I love our breakout sessions today because they're going to give us a chance to think a little bit about what that maintaining looks like, both from in a classroom, but also just those touch points, which can be something like Marcy shared, having those conversations in the hallway or gym, or things that maybe aren't even necessarily happening in between those classroom walls. And so if you would like to listen to Molly's presentation on increasing touch points, with those check-ins that we do with students to maintain that relationship, you'll stay in the main room. And if you would like to join Lisa in the breakout room, she's going to share some tips on how to warm up a chilly classroom. And I try to put some visuals there. So if you're stay here as long as you can. If you're gonna listen to Molly's presentation versus the breakout with Lisa that's coming up next. Okay, so breakout room, open all rooms. I'm gonna see if I did this right. Did we do that right? You have the option now to access the breakout room should you choose to do so, or stay here to follow along with Molly's presentation. And Molly,
Andrew, will you let us know when everybody's kind of?
Yeah. I think that's probably been about enough time for us to go ahead and kick things off, because we are going to have some people who choose to not join that breakout. So go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Touch points. Let's learn about it.
I'm sharing. Never mind. Shared the wrong thing. Present. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining here. We're going to talk about increasing your virtual touch points with students. Just like that 10 and 2, you were making time to touch base with those students. How can you take that and do it virtually? And it doesn't even have to be the 10 and 2, just any type of virtual contact with your students, knowing that they're valued and you're trying to establish that relationship with them. All right, so I want you to think about how will you, or once again, this would be great questions to challenge teachers. How will you make contact with students? How will you call on them? How will you, use their names and those kind of things? How can you re-engage them if they're disengaged? There's a great Ron Clark video about the different students that join your Zoom. And I think it would be comical to show that to kids. There's the one that wears his hoodie. There's the one that's walking around the house. I mean, it's just crazy, but it's easy for we as adults to become disengaged. And so it's just as easy for students, or easier, especially if they're not really used to this kind of a virtual environment. And then also discussions. How can we be present in our discussions with our students and not just here, we're in Zoom, but we're not actively participants. So let's see here. Whoops, this slide didn't load. That's not good. There it is. It just had too many visuals probably. I'll try it again. Show anyway. Well, there was some great pictures there. We'll just let you look at them from this standpoint. They're not loading there either. Anyway, let your students see you is my point. And so on there, I talk about when you're doing Zoom, you know, turn your camera on, make sure it's on, make sure they can see you. That's kind of a given, but make sure that theirs are on also. And I know that there's bandwidth issues, and especially with kids at home, but as much as possible, try and have it be a standard that you want your picture on. I was doing a Canvas training the other day remotely, and it's really hard to gauge feedback when you have all black screens. But I, you know, added some humor in there, and it's like, oh, okay, I see that you all are understanding that, and no one's even looking at me. But so let them see you. Another place is like if you're using a learning management system or Seesaw or something like that, make sure you put your picture in there in your profile, even on Zoom. So if you have to shut your camera off, they still see your picture. Or if you're doing office hours, you can have your picture there so they know they're in the right spot. I know how crazy that sounds, but that's just a connection. They are so excited to see that they're in that Zoom with their teacher, or they're part of that teacher's class. Another one I put is if you can give video feedback, even audio feedback on anything, that's a great way for them to make the connection with you. And I don't know if Lori Bisacker's on here, but she gave a great example. It's something we did maybe for Ed Ready, of a teacher that found where you can give audio feedback, and it was really good for just cell phones. It wasn't in a learning management system. It wasn't anything. She just basically sent and could put an audio note on a worksheet and all those kind of things. It was a great app. Like if you're using Canvas, you can do a video or even just audio feedback, but I think that's really, really important. Another thing, especially if it's early on, I've got new students, making like a slideshow about your class. Each student has a page. Make sure you do one of those too, so they can reference back. If they're missing their teacher, their classmates, they can go look through that slideshow at any time and see them. All right, we're going to try presenting again and see if we go to our next slide. Nope. So the one, another way to do this is, I have a teacher, actually it's a principal, and she does a Monday morning motivation with Summerlin Public Schools. This is Kathy Cooper, and we'll see if this sends us to play just really quick to my Facebook page. I don't know if we'll see. Are you seeing that? Yep, okay. So I'm just gonna give you a couple seconds of what she does every Monday morning.
Good morning, Summerlin Public School at Orchard. We are ready for another Monday morning motivation. This is an exciting week that we have in front of us, as it is homecoming week. The faculty is wearing our favorite sports teams today, and all of the different classes have their theme. So we get to have our dress up days. We're going to have some fun activities on.
All right. So you can kind of see, she just goes through they always have a motivational quote that they talk about, and they get one at the beginning of every week, and then teachers nominate a student that represents that quote. So here in a minute, they would have a teacher say, from last week's quote, the student nominated that shows this characteristics is so-and-so. Here's the new quote for this coming week, and any other announcements or things. This Monday, they all got new lanyards to hold their masks with, so that was pretty exciting news. Let's see if I can go back now. Now we'll present. I'm past the big picture ones. So anyway, like that, I know that some schools used a lot of Facebook for younger kids because parents were more comfortable with that. Now's the time to get parents comfortable with your learning management system if that's the case, but somehow make yourself visible to your students. All right, I'm going to talk about next is how will you call on students, and how will you notice who's participated and who's not, and how to re-engage them. So just like, oh my word, I don't know why this is, anybody have tips? We'll just run it like this for now. I don't know, you'd swear I work in technology or something, but so just as you would call on students in a classroom, you can use those same techniques here. I don't even have a can. Like if I had I could draw my sticks out. Of course I use this one because it says Molly on it, but as she draws them out, as she turns them back in upside down, or you can get really fancy with them, have kids design them. But if you're using that in your regular classroom, carry those techniques or those protocols and procedures into your virtual classroom. And so that's just one way. This is a very common way of calling on students, and use it again. Oh, geez. Oh, there we are. Okay, another one, you can do an online one. Classtools.net has a lot of different ways. There's the spinning wheel. You can put your students' names on it. They can pick by random. The nice thing is you can make the names disappear afterwards, so you know you've already called on a student and it won't call on them again, type of a deal. So if you want to use something more virtually, you sure can. Before we go on, does anyone have any cool ideas or ways to call on students virtually? Hollywood Squares ways. Flippity, that's the other one. I couldn't think of that one. Otis, I had to go back to my old one, the classtools.net. But yes, Flippity is a great one.
And what's nice about Flippity is it has more than just that, not only the name, but it'll do groups. So you can do groups of kids, line up type orders, but it also has other templates for like a Jeopardy game, basketball tournaments. I mean, they have a whole bunch of templates you can use.
Andrew, that was gross. Oh, there's a Pick Sticks app. So it's basically the same type of a thing, but it's an app. Very good. Is it web-based too, Chris, or just an app on your iPad? Do you know?
It's an app on your iPad, and what I really like about that is you can kind of preload this app with the knowledge base that your students possess, and then it will give you question stems to ask those students at where they're at knowledge-wise. So I really like it, and when I get a chance, I promote it to my teachers.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one. I haven't seen that one, but got some other good ones. Classroom Screen. Jason, tell me, what is that one? I guess I don't know.
It's similar to the others, but it allows you to create kind of a dashboard for each of your classrooms, and then you can just save that on that dashboard. You can have different backgrounds and timers and all sorts of things.
Cool. Yeah, timers is a great one to re-engage students. There's a slide later on that I'm going to show you about Bouncy Balls. That would be a fun one for that too. Let them get their wigglies out and then bring them back. Good. All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about the discussions opportunities and how to be present in those discussion boards, different ways to do that. And I know that you guys probably have a lot more to add. Sometimes when I talk to a teacher, starting with the most simple and basic, they're just so overwhelmed that sometimes they overlook those simple things. So I just kind of have a list of some good ideas here. Whole group and small group discussions, using the chat box. There's different ways to do like a back channel, even Mentimeter on your discussion questions. So students are just putting in a word at a time, but you're still, it will drive a discussion. Curtailing your lecture. Don't do what I'm doing right now, but definitely there is a place for that. And when you go remotely, sometimes it's easier for teachers to let go of that discussion or that lecture and maybe do it in a flipped classroom type of way. Using the breakout rooms, I was talking the other day with a teacher about station rotation, and she said, well, if we go remotely, I just can't do that anymore. Well, if you think about it, in a classroom, we rotated from station to station. In breakout rooms, the activity or the station rotates through the students. So your students stay in their breakout room, but every, whatever it is, 10 or 15 minutes, the activity rotates instead of the students rotating. So it still can happen. Breakout rooms I think teachers really like them when they see the power of them. I've heard some schools are concerned about breakout rooms, of having students together without an adult in there. And so I always tell schools, you need to figure that out, but here's the potential of what a breakout room can do once you figure out your legalities behind them. Have your students develop some of the questions. Give them that choice and voice in their learning. And so, and maybe we were talking about trying to find times to meet with students, do lunch bunches, just like we're doing here with a small group of students. And just visit, you know, tell them, okay, tomorrow's our lunch bunch with Chris and Otis and Anna. So bring your lunch, be ready, turn the Zoom on. We'll talk about what we're having, you know, our dogs, all those kind of good things. So just creative ways to do that. So the discussions don't always have to, you can go back to verbal discussions, and they count and are just as important as those online typing type discussions too. Another thing is if you have young kids, to do that video thread for your discussions. That's pretty powerful. I don't know where I am with time, Andrew. I didn't look at the time when I started, but.
Yeah, I got about 3 minutes here remaining. I was going to throw in here too. After talking with a friend of mine the other day, we kind of were going back and forth and thought that it's kind of interesting to send everyone to their own breakout room, which you can do. So you have individual conferencing opportunities. And I know that in some instances, students are expected to stay online for 50 minutes or an hour, particularly during those work times. That would keep them from being distracted by their peers, but also give you a safe space to have that one-on-one touch point as we're talking about here. So.
Great way to use breakout rooms. Yeah, thanks. A couple other things just to add some engagement. Hold Zoom Spirit Days. This is Aaliyah, our business manager, sporting her new ESUCC shirt. Do fun days. I will tell you, I was in on, it wasn't even my family, but I was helping someone who hadn't used Zoom do a cousins reunion through Zoom. And every so often, and I don't know if they told them this before, I don't know, but they would go hat change and everybody would leave and come back with a new hat. And I mean, there was discussion. There was, some people are just like, oh my gosh, Billy, you had that hat last year, you know, or you've had that hat since 2nd grade, whatever. But it was just, when things kind of go slow, someone would just yell out hat change. Everybody would leave. Some had them right there. Obviously some had pre-planned. Some did more than hat changes. There was whole wardrobe changes to go with them. But and so I just thought the whole Zoom was crazy because they hadn't Zoomed before and there was people talking, but that was kind of a cool thing that you could somehow incorporate. Introduce your pet day, all those kind of fun things. So here's this next one. I don't know if you've seen Bouncy Balls. I'm going to pull it up really quick here. It's a noise level meter, and there was a lot of different ways I thought we could use it. As you go, and I'm probably missing I can't see too many things open on my screen. Okay, so depending on the sensitivity, if I unmute this mic as I talk, the balls, and then it tells you if you're too noisy. So if you could have group work, you could use this in your classroom. There's, you can do emojis. Of course, I love this one coming in October. We can do a lot of eyeballs and stuff like that. So just, it's kind of crazy, but I thought it would be a good reminder of students if they're working together, or if you need them to stand up and take a wiggle break until it tells you to, you know, you're too noisy and shush, then you can sit back down or something. So I thought that one was pretty cool. Quickly, pop-up pedagogy. I love this for us even, and I want to try and integrate some pop-up pedagogy in my practice. Just asking of crazy questions, do it in announcements, or remind, those kind of things. I think it's a great way to engage with your students when you're not in a live session. And I think that that's really, really important. Andrew, is he giving me the deal?
Do this.
I mean, it's over. A couple more slides.
Referencing bubble guppies, maybe. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah. I will end here with just, I jumped ahead. There's a few online icebreakers that I had found that were really fun, kind of playing off the Hollywood Squares things. Where in the world is, so if I was looking at the Hollywood Squares, I'd say, where in the world is Chris good And you would either point down, up, to your right, or left, depending on where you see her on the screen. Yeah. So just some fun things to do when you're in that virtual setting and you need to engage your students.
Fine. Well, thanks
Right.
so much, Molly, for your presentation, and Lisa as well for leading the breakout, and hopefully got a chance to pick up some new ideas there. One of the things we certainly wanted to, in designing these experiences, was we want to rely on learning from one another and getting a chance to share stories across the state each week. And so we're going to spend the next about 18 minutes or so having the opportunity to have breakout discussions. So in small group, we'll be able to kind of get some good ideas out there. And so I'm going to go ahead then and get this breakout set up for us. All right, welcome back, everybody. As we have a couple slides left to finish out our time. Hope you learned a lot. I got a chance to jump around the breakout rooms. That was so much fun. I'm gonna have to get. I'm looking forward to the next lunch bunch already because I got so many good ideas from that.
Are you sharing, or did you want me to share?
You know, if you don't mind sharing, that works. And I'm gonna just get a link to share with you. If you're having a great time learning about some of this DL Playbook work, I have a link for you that I'm going to throw into the chat, and this is maybe a little bit ahead of the game, but I'll just do that now. There's actually in about 2 hours, Corwin's doing a Going Deeper that's free. So if you have a little bit of time, you can certainly check that out. There's the, I got a picture of it on the slide deck, but I just put the link in the chat. So check that out. If you want to register, still can. I'm going to probably listen into that here at 2 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock for our mountain timers. And I also want to say too that the Good Life EDU podcast, we had a ton of downloads last week for the 5 strategies for engagement. And so check those out if you haven't gotten a chance to listen. That's an extension from our last lunch bunch. And I'm so excited. Ann Cosma's, she's a hoot. And she's going to be talking with us about creative and innovative ways to utilize Flipgrid. So today we're talking all about needing to have that face-to-face and to be a person and to check in and have relationships and give timely feedback. Flipgrid is great for that, and I'm sure everybody on here is familiar with it. And so Ann and I, we're actually going to visit Friday, but we've already talked. Our focus is going to be what are the innovative ways that she has seen people starting to use that particular tool at this time. So check that out next week. And if we kind of get to the last of our slides here, super thanks. I just can't say it enough to Lisa and also to Molly for all the time, efforts, energy, and putting this learning experience together for us today and leading us. If you're looking for those resources, we have all those pieces available to you through our Lunch Bunch site, which is in the email, and I'll be certain to follow up with that. Last piece, a number of folks have said, hey, I'm interested in, can we share this with teachers? You can certainly point people to the videos that we record and they could access those on demand. And then for future sessions, I wouldn't necessarily put this in an email blast to everybody, but if you have some folks that you would like to tap to bring into these conversations, would love to have a teacher or several teachers or administrators' perspectives in our conversations. And so we'll open that up to folks that might be of interest to them. But it is now 1:01.